What's up everyone, we are back at it today with a Wednesday NCAA basketball slate for March 6th. Hit that thumbs up button to keep these daily videos coming out, and subscribe so you get the earliest access to our daily videos. All our picks are sponsored by StumpTheSpread.com. That's where you can get our top confidence bets and predictions on every major sport. Let us know in the comments any questions, opinions, or bets on today's college basketball slate, and let us know what teams you're going to be on. I respond to every single comment. Don't miss the end of the video where we share our favorite bets of the day. Let's dive into our first game, Northwestern versus Michigan State. Northwestern comes into this game fresh off a tough loss against Iowa. They lost that one at home, coming up short 87-80, so not a terrible game, not a blowout or anything like that. Boo Buie actually put up 27 very efficient points in that game. Northwestern actually shot 50% from the field, so that's pretty concerning that they lost that game, but we saw the Iowa Hawkeyes shoot 50% from the field and win the rebounding battle, so all of that added up to an Iowa win. Northwestern kind of lacks rebounding this season. Their defense is relatively good, their offense is very good, and they often have the best player on the court in Boo Buie, but that wasn't enough in this one. Before that loss, they had won 3 in a row, including 2 road wins, winning at Maryland, which is a very solid win, and at Indiana. So the Indiana win is something, not amazing, but Maryland is a very good win. Obviously, we expect them to win against Michigan, pretty much like we expect everyone to win against Michigan. Northwestern currently finds themselves in 3rd place in the Big Ten. That's pretty respectable in such a good conference to be that high up the standings. They got a win earlier this season over Illinois. The Wildcats can feel pretty good about their NCAA tournament hopes. Michigan State comes into this game fresh off a 3rd straight loss. They lost to Iowa, to Ohio State, and then lost a fairly competitive game at Purdue. The Spartans come into this game desperately needing a win. They're a pretty good offensive team. Their defense is very, very good. Their rebounding is a little bit lackluster. Against Purdue, they pretty much held their own on the boards though, which is kind of impressive. They did give up 50% shooting from 3-point range. They fouled an awful lot, and they just could not efficiently score inside the arc. All of that added up to them getting a loss, but when you're playing on the road, it's not that really disappointing of a loss. We're actually going to take Northwestern +7 in this one. Northwestern is 5-4-1 against the spread on the road, which is pretty respectable. Michigan State has been great against the spread playing at home this season, but I don't really feel like they're in a position where they're going to earn a blowout win. If this was more like 2 or 3 points, sure, give me Michigan State, but in this one, we're taking Northwestern and the points. They won in this matchup earlier this season, and that has a lot to do with this prediction. Next up, we're looking at LSU heading to Arkansas. LSU comes into this game fresh off back-to-back wins, but taking down Georgia and Vanderbilt, not really going to impress me. They do, however, have recent wins over Kentucky and over South Carolina. Both of those were 1-point wins, so not exactly blowouts. They did play very well in those games, and they've been a bit better here down the stretch, but they have struggled against the better teams in the conference, and they got absolutely blown out at home against Arkansas earlier in this season. This squad is decent on the boards. Their defense is pretty bad, though. They rely a lot on their offense. Jordan Wright is a reasonable scorer, but he's no one to write home about. 15 points per game isn't exactly going to carry your team to wins. In their recent win against lowly Vanderbilt, we did see Wright put up 15 points, so right around his season average. And LSU in general played pretty well, but they were just able to overwhelm their opponents, who shot only 3 of 21 from 3. Vanderbilt just isn't good. Looking at Arkansas in this one, the Razorbacks have also lost back-to-back games. They lost to Vanderbilt, which is a pretty big letdown, but they were in a huge look-ahead spot with their game against Kentucky coming up. They went on the road and ended up losing in Kentucky, 111-102. A crazy high-scoring game. We actually saw Battle put up 34 points in that loss. A very tough look to lose that game, but going against Kentucky, I don't think they have too much to feel ashamed about in that loss. Arkansas has been in the bottom part of the SEC all season long. They're not an amazing team. They play absolutely no defense, which is a big problem. Their rebounding isn't very good. Their scoring can be decent, as you can see from that huge offensive outburst against Kentucky, but it was not enough to get them over the hump, and at only 14-15 overall, they are not going to be playing in the NCAA tournament. LSU is 5-4 against the spread on the road this season, and Arkansas is 6-10 against the spread at home. That's a pretty concerning at-home mark right there. We're going to go with LSU and the points in this one to get some revenge. They did lose to Arkansas in this matchup earlier this season, but I don't think that's going to matter. LSU is by far the better team right now, or at least that's the way things look, and Arkansas is having a hard time. Give us the LSU Tigers in this one. Next up, we've got Loyola Chicago heading to Davidson. Loyola Chicago comes into this game fresh off one of their biggest wins of the season. They took down number 21 Dayton. That's a huge spot for them. Loyola Chicago is now only a single game back of Richmond for the top spot in the A10, and they only have games against Davidson and LaSalle left on the regular season schedule. That's all very good for this team. They're pushing their way towards the NCAA tournament. Their rebounding is very good. They're a solid defensive team. Their offense has been much better here recently, so that's definitely something to look forward to as they head into postseason play. Davidson, on the other hand, comes into this game fresh off 3 straight losses. They did just play a very close one against UMass, but they got absolutely blown out at Dayton. They lost in a close one at Richmond, so that was actually a really good loss if there is such a thing, This squad struggles a lot on the boards though. Their offense is mediocre. They're not really good enough to hang with the better teams in the A10. Their rebounding is a significant problem. That's something we're definitely going to be looking at a lot in this game. We expect Loyola Chicago to play well. Davidson's only 5-8 against the spread at home. Loyola Chicago is 6-4 against the spread playing on the road. Loyola Chicago has already won in this matchup, getting a 13-point win at home. We're going to take the Ramblers in this one. I think they get the job done pretty comfortably here as they look to polish off 2 last conference games and hope Richmond can slip up, which would give them a chance to take over the top spot in the A10. Next up, we're headed to the Big 12. We're looking at TCU going on the road to take on West Virginia. TCU comes into this game fresh off back-to-back losses, but losing to Baylor and then at BYU. Nothing to feel bad about there. The Horned Frogs are 3-3 over their last 6, but with your losses being in such good teams and winning the games you're supposed to, taking down West Virginia, Kansas State, and Cincinnati, those are the kind of wins that can eventually build you a tournament resume. TCU has a legitimate offensive threat in Emmanuel Miller. They're putting up 80 points per game, which is a great number. If you're getting up in that range, you are a good offensive team. Their defense is solid, and their rebounding is also pretty good. Right now, they're only 8-8 in the Big 12, but the Big 12 is so good, that's not really a bad number at all. West Virginia, on the other hand, is holding on to the absolute bottom spot in the conference. They've lost 3 straight and 7 of the last 8 overall, with their only win coming in a pretty surprising win at home over UCF. The Mountaineers had been on a trend of keeping games close, but they just lost by 11 against Texas Tech, and that was the game the Mountaineers were playing at home. This just has not been a very good season for West Virginia. They went through a lot of turmoil in the offseason. Their offense is absolutely terrible. They've got no go-to scorers. Their defense isn't very good. Their rebounding is bad. Sure, they've shown some sparks when they're playing at home, but it really has not been enough to turn the tide. And this one, we see West Virginia, they're only 8-9 against the spread at home, not the numbers you're used to seeing from this team at home. TCU, on the other hand, is 6-4 against the spread playing on the road. They've dominated this matchup already once this season. West Virginia is terrible. Give me TCU on the road in this one. Next up, we've got one of the bigger games of the day. We've got number 20 BYU going on the road to take on number 6 Iowa State. BYU comes into this game fresh off 2 solid wins. They went to Kansas and got the win, although Kansas was hobbled for that one. And then they got the win at home over TCU. The Cougars are an elite offensive team. They've got some solid scorers. They can really shoot the ball well from deep. This is a good squad on offense. Their defense is decent, but not elite. Their rebounding numbers are very good, which is helped out a little bit by their pace. But up and down the roster, this is a pretty good team, better than we've expected over the course of their program history for BYU. Iowa State has been playing absolutely fantastic. They've won 3 in a row. Their only loss recently at all was at number 2 Houston, and a game they've kept pretty close down the stretch, and they got the cover for us. I remember that one. That felt pretty good. Iowa State plays amazing defense. This is an elite defensive team. They can crash the boards. Their offense is very good for a team that concentrates this much on defense. They've been beating opponents by sizable margins lately, holding them to some crazy low totals. They just held UCF to only 52 points. Before that, they played at home against Oklahoma and held them to only 45. This is a team that plays great. They're taking things pretty seriously right now. They're only 1 game back of Houston for the top spot in the Big 12, so they're going to be looking to push that envelope. If they can get wins in the last 2 regular season games, they can put some pressure on Houston. BYU is only 2-7 against the spread on the road this season, a terrible number. They've been a completely different team home and away. Iowa State, on the other hand, has been absolutely fantastic. One of the best teams in the nation at home. They're 14-3 against the spread at home. We are going to take Iowa State -6.5 in this one. I think they get the job done defensively. They're going to hold down BYU. I don't expect the Cougars to shoot the ball as well as they normally do from distance. All of that adds up to Iowa State being my pick in this one. In what is probably the most hyped up matchup of the day, we see number 2 Yukon heading to number 8 Marquette. The Huskies come into this game fresh off back-to-back wins. They blew out Villanova and then they blew out Seton Hall. Both of those games kind of felt like bounce backs after a terrible disaster at Creighton where they got absolutely demolished. Before that though, they had comfortably demolished number 4 Marquette. Yukon is one of the best offensive teams in the nation. They're very good on the boards. Their defense is very good. You just have to wonder which team is going to show up on a nightly basis. They can be dominant or they can lay an egg like they did against Creighton. Marquette comes into this game. They're kind of in a similar boat. They just lost at Creighton in a blowout, so they're now in a bounce back spot. But the Golden Eagles have not been very good against elite competition all season long. The best win that Marquette has probably had in the regular season this far is over Creighton, but that was very early in the season. They did get a win over Kansas. They got a win over Illinois, but those are so early in the year here, we don't even really care about those at all at this point. This is a totally different squad than the one that was playing at that spot in the season. Marquette is a very good offensive team. Their defense is solid, but their rebounding can really struggle, and I think that could be a problem for them in this game. Honestly, guys, I'm not really sure who I like the most. I really wanted to break down this game because it's one of the biggest ones on the slate. I think we're going to actually go with Marquette as a very, very small lean. They're +4. This is a huge revenge spot for them, and what really put it over the top for me was Marquette is 11-4 against the spread at home. I know a lot of those numbers are coming from them beating up on bad teams, but they have really, really good players on their roster. I expect them to bounce back and really be out for blood in a game that they have to really want after getting humiliated by Yukon earlier this season. So as a very small lean, giving Marquette and the points in this one. Next up, we're looking at Mississippi State headed to Texas A&M. Mississippi State has lost back-to-back games, losing to Kentucky and to Auburn, but the Kentucky game was super, super close, and playing at Auburn has been a tall task for pretty much anyone. Mississippi State has a solid leading scorer in Josh Hubbard. Their offense is decent. Their rebounding is very good, so that's something to look at for sure in this game. Their defense, on the other hand, not so great. It's not absolutely terrible, but going against Texas A&M could be something of a tall task. The Aggies come into this one fresh off of a win at Georgia, so if you're not beating Georgia in the SEC, you're really in a bad spot. Those are wins you're going to need to be getting. The Aggies have not had the season they envisioned. Wade Taylor IV is an absolute monster, but he has not been quite good enough to put them over the top. Their rebounding is excellent. Their offense is pretty good, but their defense just hasn't been getting it done. They've lost some very close games recently. Some of them they really let slip away. They did get a huge win over Tennessee a few weeks ago, but they're going to need to finish this season strong if they're going to make it into the NCAA tournament. Both of these teams are terrible in their trends in this game. Mississippi State is 2-7 against the spread on the road, and Texas A&M is 4-10 against the spread at home. We're actually going to go with Texas A&M at home in this one. They're only -2.5. I think they find a way to get this done. They're going to have the best player on the floor. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that Wade Taylor IV is going to be the best player in this matchup. I think they'll get an edge on the boards also, which should help. So give me Texas A&M -2.5 in this one. Next up, we're looking at the Indiana Hoosiers going to Minnesota to take on the Golden Gophers. Indiana comes into this game fresh off back-to-back wins. They just won at Maryland, which is a very solid win, and they knocked off Wisconsin. This one was at home in Indiana. The Hoosiers have definitely been playing better down the stretch. They needed those 2 wins, though, after dropping 4 in a row. This team is not good enough on defense. That's their biggest problem. Their rebounding isn't amazing. Their offense isn't amazing. They could skate by with those if they could play a little bit better defense. Malik Reneau is a very solid scorer. He's efficient. He's putting up 16 points per game. He's shooting almost 58% from the field, but that really hasn't been enough to put them over the top, generally speaking, this season. They did beat Minnesota earlier this year, but that was a home game for Indiana, and we all know Minnesota is a completely different squad when they're on their home court. Minnesota comes into this game fresh off of a win over Penn State. Before that, they lost an excruciating one to Illinois. Before that, they lost at Nebraska. Everybody loses at Nebraska, so we're not really going to hold that one against them. This team is elite when they're playing on their home floor. That's really what it comes down to. Are they at home? Then they're in a good spot. Dawson Garcia is an absolute monster. Elijah Hawkins is a great point guard. This team can put up some points. They move the ball really well. Their defense is a little bit suspect. Their rebounding is good, though. We're going to go with Minnesota -5 at home in this one. The Golden Gophers are an insane 17-2 against the spread at home. It doesn't get much better than that. They're one of the best teams in the nation against the spread at home. That's why we're going with them in this one. Next up, we're looking at the number 22 Utah State Aggies going on the road to take on San Jose State. Utah State comes in this game fresh off of a 3rd straight win. They won 5 of 6 overall. Their last 2 have not been impressive, taking down Air Force and Fresno State in semi-competitive games, which is a little bit of a concern. But before that, they knocked off San Diego State. That's a solid win. This squad currently finds themselves atop the Mountain West, but they are tied with Boise State, and there's a whole bunch of teams up there. This conference has been absolutely bonkers. We're looking at Utah State being one of the better offensive teams in the country. They play pretty good defense. They need to turn it on against these bad teams, though. It's a little bit concerning that they've been playing down a little bit to the level of their competition, but they did blow out San Jose State by 21 points earlier in the season. Grade Osobor is an absolute monster. Darius Brown II is a monster. This team is just good up and down the roster. San Jose State, on the other hand, they are the bottom team in the Mountain West. They've had some wins this season, but they've been against Air Force, so we're not exactly going to write home about those. That's the other worst team in the conference. They come into this game fresh off of an 18-point loss at UNLV, and this will be their last regular season conference game of the year. I don't really think we're going to see too much from them. They're a terrible, terrible rebounding team, one of the worst in the nation. Their offense isn't very good. They don't really have great go-to scoring options. This team just doesn't really measure up. 10.5 points feels like a lot, especially with with Utah State only being 2-7-2 against the spread on the road, but San Jose State is only 5-8 against the spread at home. Give me Utah State on the road in this one. They need this win to keep pace, and I think they find a way to buckle down and get a comfortable win by easy double digits. That's all the games we have time for today. Let us know in the comments what you think of these predictions. Thanks for watching. You can click the link in the description to check out stumpthespread.com to see all of our top plays. Hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you're enjoying these videos. We will see you guys tomorrow for more NCAA basketball action.